I'm Jason UFC, and today we have a story about UFC middleweight champion is critical of UFC welterweight contender Khamzat Chimaev. UFC middleweight champion Alex Pereira had some choice words for the number 3 ranked UFC welterweight Khamzat Chimaev recently. Late 2022, Pereira challenged Chimaev to a fight in the light heavyweight division. Chimaev is a welterweight. Pereira is a middleweight. In Pereira, the middleweight champion, challenged the welterweight to a fight at 205 pounds. But we're going to get into that part of why that happened and the rest of the story later on. Let me see. Okay, late last year after Pereira defeated Israel Adesanya for the undisputed middleweight championship at UFC 281 in New York City, Chimaev, the welterweight, was quick to call out Pereira for a fight in the middleweight division. Pereira, who has to endure a grueling 40-pound weight cut to even make the 185-pound middleweight weight limit, suggested that Chimaev and him and Pereira fight at 205 pounds. How about that? Okay. This is what Pereira had to say about Chimaev. I knew he didn't want the fight. That's what Pereira says about Chimaev. During a recent interaction with Inside Fighting, Pereira shares his thoughts on Chimaev. Pereira was asked if he be up for Chimaev as his first middleweight challenger. Should the last stylebender, Israel Adesanya, be for some reason unavailable? This is what Pereira had to say. Well, Chimaev mentioned a title defense, a middleweight title defense for me, but it was right after my last fight, so I think it was kind of impossible, right? I called him out for a light heavyweight title. Hold on, no. I don't think that's, obviously that doesn't make sense. Let's skip that part. I called him out for a light heavyweight fight, not a title fight because neither of them champion. But I called him out for a light heavyweight fight, but I wasn't in a position to do that either. I called him out just to see if he was up to it. I knew he didn't want the fight. Okay, so we'll come back to that one. We'll come back to that quote a little bit later. Pereira went on to discuss Chimaev's recent inactivity at welterweight at the moment. According to Pereira, it seems that Chimaev's fear of losing at welterweight and potentially sullying his ongoing talks of competing at middleweight and light heavyweight. A little while ago, Chimaev talked about fighting at middleweight and also at light heavyweight, Pereira said. So Chimaev's in the lower weight class, welterweight, but in his weight class, when he's maybe already the next title challenger, it's kind of, there are no plans for him to fight. He doesn't want to, because if Chimaev loses, like anyone can, if Chimaev loses in his own weight class, it ends all the noise he's making. Chimaev's running from his own weight class because he's the next title challenger. Okay, we're gonna have to come back to that paragraph and that quote recently because there's a lot going on there. Chimaev has not fought since his last fight at UFC 279, a first round victory over Kevin Holland. Rumors have swirled of a potential number 1 contenders fight with Colby Covington at welterweight this year. However, considering Colby Covington's own lengthy period of inactivity at the moment, the probability of that fight happening remains unclear. Okay, so we're gonna go backwards and try to add some details to each of these kind of important fights in quotes in this article. Chimaev's last fight was at UFC 279. He was scheduled to fight Nate Diaz in the welterweight division, obviously in the main event, 5-round main event. But that fight, he ended up missing weight. I can't say he. Chimaev ended up missing weight for the welterweight limit by like 7, 8 7, 8, 9 pounds, I think. The welterweight limit, it was a welterweight fight versus Chimaev and Nate Diaz. That was the main event, but Chimaev came in 9 pounds overweight, right? 7, 8, 9 pounds overweight. So that fight was scrapped, and Chimaev ended up fighting Kevin Holland in a catchweight fight at UFC 279, and he wasn't even in the main event anymore. Chimaev got kicked off the main event to the co-main event. So Chimaev's last fight, when he was scheduled to be the main event of a pay-per-view, he ended up missing weight and being knocked down to the co-main event. So there's a story there. Let me see. Chimaev doesn't want to, because if Chimaev loses, like anyone can, if Chimaev loses in his own weight class, it ends all the noise Chimaev's making. So he's running from his own weight class. Wow, because he's the next title challenger. Now, there's a lot to go in there. Personally, I do not believe that if Chimaev takes a loss in the welterweight division, it ends all the noise. It stops his hype train. I don't think it does any of that. I would imagine he would still be in titleship contendership. A lot of UFC fighters have, many losses on their record, and they're still in title contendership. There's a few fighters who haven't had a victory in the last 2-3 years, and they're still right there in the title talk and the top 5 of the divisions. So I don't think Chimaev is running away from his own weight class because he's afraid to take a loss. And I don't know if he's the next title challenger. The UFC recently announced in the welterweight division, Leon Edwards will be defending his welterweight championship versus Kamaru Usman in March. They haven't really announced who's the backup fighter for that fight, but a lot of UFC top 10 welterweight contenders are not currently booked for a fight, and I don't think there's even like a welterweight fight on that card that could step in should any one of those the main event, Edwards or Usman, not be able to make that fight. So there will clearly be a backup fighter. The question is that backup fighter Colby Covington? It seems like that would make sense. Will it be Chimaev, who missed weight in his last main event? I don't know if that's a great idea. Will it be Gilbert Burns? Will it be Wonderboy Thompson? There's a few names. Will it be Jorge Masvidal? There's a lot of names in the UFC welterweight division that could be the backup fighter. There's a lot of names that can go on that card. I don't know if the UFC is going to add a welterweight contendership fight on that card, or are they just going to have, all those names basically be available to be the backup fighter for that fight with Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman. But we'll have to see. That happens in March. Let me see. Now, the main thing is here. This is the fun part, because this is where things get crazy. Now we start talking about Pereira, right? We've been talking a lot about Chimaev and his, what's going on with him and his division. Let's see what's going on with Pereira. Pereira says, well, Chimaev mentioned a title defense for me, Pereira, but it was right after my last fight, so it was kind of impossible. I called him out. I called Chimaev out for a light heavyweight fight, but I wasn't in position to do that fight either. I called him out anyway just to see if he was up to it. I knew he didn't want the fight. Okay, there's a lot going on in that paragraph there. So the thing is with Pereira, he's a big boy. There's been rumors that he walks around 210, 215, maybe even 220 pounds. I don't know if he entered the cage at that weight, but Pereira is a very, 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 very big boy for 185 pounds. I believe when he fought Israel Adesanya, he was one of the last fighters to make weight on that card. So he definitely comes very, very close to, I don't think he's ever missed weight or anything like that. But after Pereira defeated Israel Adesanya, that was his first time entering the 5th round in his MMA career. It was a tough fight. He ended up defeating Israel Adesanya by 5th round TKO. And then obviously, Twitter fingers and everybody on Twitter, as soon as a fighter wins, everyone wants to fight them. So Chimaev obviously jumped on the internet and wanted to fight Pereira next, challenged Pereira to fight Pereira in Brazil, which would have been yesterday. But that was in like November or December of last year. And Pereira, like I said, just made weight for his middleweight fight versus Israel Adesanya. So Pereira's thing was like, listen, I'm not going to be able to make weight 2 months later after having my first 5-round fight and defend my bout versus Chimaev in Brazil 2 months after, fighting for the middleweight championship and cutting on that weight. So I will challenge anyone, or Chimaev. If Chimaev wants to take the fight versus me, we could fight at 205 pounds. Now, obviously, on the face of it, the middleweight champion challenging a welterweight at 205 pounds sounds crazy. It almost doesn't make any sense. But Chimaev kind of made his own bed with this. He's currently has victories in 2 divisions. When he first jumped into the UFC, he was threatening to jump up to like 3 divisions. So it wasn't like a crazy idea for Pereira to say like, listen, if you want to fight, 2 months is too much. It's not enough time for me to make weight in the middleweight division to defend my title. But if you want to fight, we could fight at 205 pounds, right? I guess, I don't know if, I can't say it was an official fight. Obviously the fight didn't happen. I don't know if Chimaev turned it down. I don't know if the UFC turned it down. A lot of people are going after Chimaev, saying Chimaev turned it down. Maybe Chimaev did turn it down. Maybe the UFC turned it down. I don't know. But Pereira even says that he wasn't even in a position to even make that weight for, 205 pounds, but he was just throwing it out there to see what Chimaev would say. Obviously that fight didn't happen, but he was just kind of trolling, saying like, hey, if you want to fight, let's fight at 205 pounds, even though he wasn't really in position to even make that weight, right? And in 2 months, but Chimaev or the UFC both, or one of them, said no. So yeah, I mean, that's basically the story with Chimaev. I don't know what the beef is between Chimaev and Pereira. Like, they do seem to be talking a lot to each other. Like, not too many other contenders have been calling out Chimaev. Not too many other contenders have been calling out Pereira. These two seem to have some kind of beef. I have no idea where it stems from. Like I said, Chimaev is a welterweight, Pereira is a middleweight. They're talking about fighting at 205 pounds, so it's craziness. I don't know what's going on with Israel Adesanya. Will he be fighting Pereira next for the middleweight championship? Will Alex Pereira fight Robert Whittaker next for the middleweight championship, or will Alex Pereira fight Khamzat Chimaev next for the middleweight championship? Recent events just had Alex Pereira's training partner Glover Teixeira lose his light heavyweight championship fight versus Jamal Hill. There's a meme going around with Pereira and Jamal Hill in some kind of a stare down. I don't know if words were exchanged, but obviously we get the message that Pereira was looking at Jamal Hill thinking like, listen, I can make 185 pounds, but I can also make 205 pounds. So maybe Pereira goes up to 205 pounds and fight Jamal Hill next, right? There's so many options. Like I said, currently right now, if you look at like so many of these contenders, Robert Whittaker doesn't have a fight. Israel Adesanya doesn't have a fight. Alex Pereira doesn't have a fight. Khamzat Chimaev doesn't have a fight. Jorge Masvidal doesn't have a fight. Kobe Covington doesn't have a fight. There's a lot of fights the UFC is going to have to make in the next upcoming months. We'll see where the pieces land. Personally, I want to see Chimaev and Alex Pereira fight in the middleweight division for the middleweight championship next. But with Robert Whittaker losing his opponent versus Paulo Costa, I would not be surprised if Robert Whittaker fights versus if Robert Whitaker fight versus Pereira next for the middleweight championship. I don't know what's going to happen with Chimaev. As I said, he missed weight in his last fight. That was in September of last year. He didn't take much damage versus Kevin Holland. That was a first round submission. So he has not fought since September of last year. I don't know if his next fight is going to be in a welterweight, middleweight, or even light heavyweight division. We'll have to see what happens with Alex Pereira. Is he going to fight in the middleweight division, or is he going to move up and challenge Jamal Hill in the light heavyweight division? Where's Kobe Covington? Where's Jorge Masvidal in the welterweight division? We'll see who's the backup fighter for Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman in March. That's 2 months away. I don't know if the UFC ever announces. I don't follow it like that, but I don't know if they announce if there's a backup fighter or if there's like a secret backup fighter who just pops up during the weigh-ins and things like that. I have no idea. I really have no idea. But we'll see if the UFC adds a welterweight fight to the undercard of Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman, or will there just be a backup fighter? Will Chimaev be the backup fighter? Will Kobe Covington be the backup fighter? Or will Jorge Masvidal be the backup fighter? But let me know your opinion on this story. Who do you want to see these fighters fight next? A lot of UFC matchmaking to happen. This is the fun part of the UFC, when we could just matchmake all these fighters and who you would want to see fight next. I'm Jason, UFC. Today we had a story about Alex Pereira is critical. The UFC middleweight champion Alex Pereira is critical of UFC welterweight contender Khamzat Chimaev. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the $1 donation button, and please tune in to the next video on this channel. Thanks a million for watching.